Ladies and gentlemen, mischief makers and mayhem merchants, welcome back to the Grand Fiasco. Now, ordinarily, Saturdays around here are reserved for speculation, theory crafting, and a healthy dose of tinfoil hat nonsense. We dig through lore, we chase whispers, and we connect dots that may or may not exist. But today I'm taking a brief detour from lore and speculation because there's something happening in the community right now that I can't help but notice, and honestly, I've been on the receiving end of it a fair bit lately, and it all revolves around one very overused word: rat. Because apparently these days, everyone's a rat. And I think we need to talk about what that actually means. So grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's have a chat. Welcome in, everybody. I hope your Saturday is off to a good start. So today's video is a little bit of something different. We've been doing a couple more of these talking style videos recently, and I thought it was time for us to have a little discussion about the rat situation. And to start off, I think it's good that we kind of go over context, right? Arc Raiders is a looter shooter. And not all of them, but primarily the majority of looter shooters are a PvPvE experience. And in my personal opinion, that's what makes it real, right? Like there's the stakes of you going into a raid and trying to make it out, and the tension is the core experience, and that is because of the beautiful mix of PvE and PvP experiences together in one experience that creates a sandbox where pretty much anything can happen. PvE alone is going to be a predictable, eventually kind of safe feeling experience that once you know what you're doing isn't going to bring a whole lot to the table in the same way. And PvP alone eventually just starts to feel like an arena shooter with extra steps, and it also becomes stale in its own way. And so that mix is what creates that magic, in my personal opinion, and is really the thing that got all of us hooked on this game and hooked on this genre for those of us who have played other games inside the looter shooter genre. And I really believe that that uncomfortable feeling at evac isn't bad design necessarily. That's kind of the point of this genre of game, is that tension and release when you manage to make it out with the loot that you manage to find. And inevitably, that also brings up the fact that in games like this, and really in any game ever, people are going to find the path of least resistance. And in an arena shooter or something like that, the path of least resistance is going to look like meta weapon picks. But in a game like this, one of those meta directions that you can go, you can decide to be a rat. And I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the appropriate decision, in my personal opinion. I think there are much more enjoyable ways to play the game, but I think that it's important that we take a second to really define what a rat is, because that term has gotten used so much by the community at this point that it's really just starting to lose meaning. And it's gotten to a comical point where pretty much anyone who engages in PvP, even in reasonable circumstances, gets labeled a rat. So let's take a second and let's define a rat. So in my personal opinion, right, because that's all I can speak from, I believe that a rat is someone who avoids fair fights entirely whenever possible. They're not somebody who wants PvP. They want your loot, and they want it with little to no risks if possible. And this is going to look like evac camping key rooms, or high traffic ambushes, and the obvious fake friendly don't shoots you in the back as soon as you take a little bit of damage moments and stuff like that. A rat isn't someone who wants to fight you. A rat's someone who's avoiding the fight until you can't fight back. They're not playing for the fight, they're playing for the outcome. And obviously that's a reasonable thing to be doing in a game like this. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to play that way. If you choose to play that way, that's your own free choice. But it is reasonable to be upset with that. But I think that that, by definition, is what a rat is. And if anybody wants to add more to the definition, feel free to throw your opinions down below. But beyond that, there is plenty of annoying and arguably bitchy behavior when it comes to PvP. And for instance, I would like to bring up two other examples of things that I would put in the same level of annoyance as rats, in my personal opinion, which would be meta riding in PvP. So there's people that still to this day decide that trigger nade spam is a necessity, and you don't even see them shoot a gun in a fight, and it's literally just nade spam, nade spam, nade spam. Terrible behavior. In my personal opinion, that's just as bad as being a rat. And then also from the other side, you still deal with some annoying and shisty behavior in PvE lobbies. You know, every time I go into a PvE lobby to go do some arc hunting, inevitably I, drop a deadline on a bastion, and inevitably like 6 annoying little bastards come out of the woodworks to loot all of my stuff that I got from my bastion kill, which inevitably, in my opinion, is arguably just as annoying. And so like that is the same level of players gaining from somebody else's effort, right? Which is almost in the same category. But at the end of the day, you have the right to play whatever way you want. But I think that the term rat has gotten overused at this point. And I think that it's important to differentiate between a rat and somebody who's playing in a bitchy way, right? I think we should start calling each other bitches more rather than calling each other rats or whatever term you want to use. That's your freedom of choice. But at the end of the day, if they're not camping a high traffic point, an evac, or pretending to be friendly and then shooting you in the back, that's not a rat. That's just somebody who plays in a way that you don't necessarily appreciate, which at the end of the day, as we discussed earlier, is kind of one of the beautiful parts of this game, right? You load into a raid, you have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the thing that keeps us all coming back, is that it's that gamble. You might get good stuff, you might lose everything, you might meet cool people, you might make friends, you might get some really good shit talking, and a little bit of other stuff along those lines, right? And that is the mix that keeps me coming back to games like this. And I think that it's important that we all, remember that games like this are beautiful because of that crossover, right? And at a certain point, if you're enjoying primarily one side, that's fine, but you might gain more enjoyment from mixing up a little bit. I like to balance between PvE lobbies and PvP lobbies, and I have fun bouncing back and forth between the two because you get very different experiences, and I think that's really fun. And I will say there are some aspects of ratty behavior that could potentially see some reworks. Again, I think that it's a valid experience in games like this, and inevitably every looter shooter experiences the rat problem, right? But there are certain instances of things that Embark could do a better job of reducing ratty behavior around certain pain points, and I do understand that, such as adjusting the hitboxes for certain areas in certain evacs, such as the south entrance in Plaza Rosa on Buried City. They just recently fixed that one a little bit, or adding lighting to some of the subway stations, stuff like that, right? I don't think that they should ever remove the options for doing those things, because at the end of the day, even though it personally really pisses me off when I get ratted, it still keeps it interesting, right? And at the end of the day, I think that PvP and PvE are there to play off of each other. And if I know that I'm going to get out safely once I get down to the subway station, it's not very interesting, right? And so even though I hate the little bastard that's hiding in the corner, it keeps my games interesting. And maybe I get a little upset about it sometime. I think we all do, right? But at the end of the day, those are the things that keep stuff interesting. So I will leave this whole topic with the idea that I think that if everybody plays with a little bit more balance, it might be better for everyone. And, maybe this is a silly one to bring up, but my parents taught me everything in moderation, right? And so if you're primarily enjoying PvE, or you're primarily enjoying PvP, spend a day, spend a week, go test out the other side of the servers and see what's up with it. You might find something that you haven't realized you would enjoy, and you might learn something from it. Because generally, I would say that the PvP players are there to create tension in games like this, and the PvE players are there to really fuel the economy and progression systems, right? Because in the same way, the PvP players are going to be getting most of their loot from PvP stuff, which means inevitably they're profiting off of a system where other people are doing PvE to be able to craft and build those weapons and util items and whatever, right? That being said, Arc Raiders does have a pretty forgiving crafting system, so that's a little bit less so in a game like this. But at the end of the day, I do think that it is reasonable for everybody to play a little bit more on the other side. So if you're a PvE player primarily, spend a little bit of time. In my personal opinion, the best learning grounds for learning PvP, load into solo squads on Stella Montis on a free kit and just run that until you feel comfortable in a fight. You're going to die a whole lot. That's the point. It's not about getting out. It's about feeling comfortable in a fight. Practice that until you're not getting stressed out in those situations. And obviously, you're not going to make it out a whole lot. But once you feel comfortable in that situation, you're much more likely to survive getting ratted. Because if I'm being honest, I'm not by any means like an amazing player. I would say I'm maybe like slightly above average when it comes to PvP. I still win probably at least 60% of my fights when I get ratted by somebody at evac or something like that, because most of them are not very good at the game. So if you can survive the first barrage of bullets from a rat, most of the time their gameplay crumples from there because they don't know how to actually fight somebody. So if you take a little bit of time to learn how to fight, you're going to survive getting ratted a lot more, which makes it a more enjoyable experience. So and then at that point, you can go back and just stay in Care Bear lobbies and go have fun doing that. Absolutely no shame. Care Bear lobbies are fun. I love being in them. I also enjoy some PvP though. And that being said, if you only PvP, you're missing one of the most beautiful parts of the game, which is the in-game proximity chat where people are just getting up to silly things and role-playing and doing stupid stuff. For instance, the other day, and I'll try to throw a gameplay of this up if I can find it, but I ended up going to Destella with Delabra, planning to do some, PvP with a new shotgun, and ended up meeting some dude that also had the Delabra, and then we were just like role-playing the, Stella Montis vacuum cleaners. It was really dumb. It was really stupid, but that's the kind of silly stuff that you run into in more friendly lobbies, right? And so I would say this game is a beautiful experience because of the mix of both sides, and I think that you know, inevitably with games, right? Both sides of a game are going to start having issues with each other, and depending on circumstance, people are going to have things to say about it. But everything in moderation. You should enjoy a little bit of everything, right? Maybe you enjoy one side primarily, branch out a little bit, test out some new stuff, try new ways to play. Don't dick ride meta. Don't, you know, play in annoying ways. Learn how to actually fight. You don't need to be a rat. Just go hit an aim trainer for like 5 minutes and you'll fucking learn something, you know? So yeah, I'd say that's kind of mostly what I've got. Generally, the point of this is let's stop overusing the term rat. It's okay to call somebody whatever name you want for whatever they're doing, but rat specifically refers to specific behaviors, and let's start refocusing that term because I think it's an important term in games like this. It's a valid term to use, but let's find other better words for the other annoying ways people play so it doesn't get confused. And with that, that's all I really got to say on it. Hope you enjoyed this slightly different discussion style piece this Saturday, and I will see you all in the next one. As always, stay safe out in the Rust Belt, and take care. Thanks.